Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today I'm checking out the new album from probably the most polarizing musician today, Machine Gun Kelly's new album, Lost Americana. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So I think Machine Gun Kelly is probably the most polarizing musician today. He just released his 7th studio album on August 8th, and this was the follow-up to both Mainstream Sellout in 2022 and Tickets to My Downfall in 2020, both of which were produced by Travis Barker, and they signified this big dramatic genre shift from what he'd done from his first 4 albums, which were all rap albums, even though Machine Gun Kelly's always kind of dabbled a little bit here and there with rock over his career. It wasn't really until he teamed up with Travis Barker in 2020 and recorded Tickets to My Downfall that he made that big dramatic shift in his career. I think that transition really kind of started with Hotel Diablo in 2019. It was his 4th straight album to be on the top 10 of the Billboard 200. It had the single I Think I'm Okay with Travis Barker and Youngblood, which is kind of widely seen as being that spark that really kind of lit the match for the pop-punk revival in the 2020s. And from what I understand initially, Machine Gun Kelly was really reluctant to have Travis Barker on that song out of fear that it would sound too much like that early 2000s Blink-182 kind of style. And then the single would go on to be a massive success. And then early on in the 2020 lockdowns, Machine Gun Kelly started kicking around the idea of doing an entire album in that pop-punk style. Like I said before, he has kind of dabbled here or there with rock music across his career. He's always been a fan of that pop-punk style of music. Was never in a place in his career where he could really implement that in an entire album. So he started working on Tickets to My Downfall. It would go on to be a massive success. His first #1 album on the Billboard 200. And at that point, the biggest album of his career. Off the strength of that album, he would not only win a Billboard Music Award and an iHeart Music Award, Billboard would actually have that list as the second best album, or second best rock album of 2020. Kerrang! Actually had it listed as the 9th best album overall, and ended up going platinum here in the US. And say what you will about the album and Machine Gun Kelly, it's undeniable that Tickets to My Downfall opened up that genre of music to an all-new generation of fans. A lot of those younger people that got into punk and pop punk because of Tickets to My Downfall would go on to discover all those other classic bands in that genre. I actually worked with a few people that, when that album came out, they had never listened to that genre of music before and fell in love with it and discovered so many different artists because of that album. So I kind of look at Tickets to My Downfall, kind of the same way that my generation was with Dookie. Now, granted, Dookie and Tickets to My Downfall, there's no comparison between the two albums as far as quality goes, at least in my opinion. But when it comes to this generation, that was the album that got them into all these other bands, where with a lot of my generation in the 90s, Dookie was kind of that album also. And then in 2022, he would release the follow-up to Tickets to My Downfall, Mainstream Sellout. And even though it would also hit #1 on the Billboard 200, I don't think commercially it was as successful as Tickets was. And after the release of Mainstream Sellout, I kind of wondered the direction he would go after that album. Because, I don't think the quality was quite there. I think with Mainstream Sellout, a lot of those songs sounded like they were songs that were just kind of left off of Tickets to My Downfall. So I kind of wondered, would he kind of stick to that genre, or would he eventually kind of go back to being rap? But over the last couple of years, a lot of stuff has gone on in his life. I know he was working on new music. It was supposed to be a new rap album. But from what I understand, he wasn't happy with the direction it was going. He wasn't entirely happy with the people he was working with either. He said it felt a little forced. He ended up deleting the entire project and going in a completely different direction. So I was a little surprised to see the more kind of pop-centric avenue he would take with his new album, Lost Americana. I think it's a bold new musical direction for him as an artist, where he kind of ventures even further away from that Midwest rap scene that he started in. But I think this album might be his most personal and genre-defying album yet. So I'm interested to see what people think of this new album, because, like I said earlier, Machine Gun Kelly, probably the most polarizing musician today. If not the most, he's definitely one of the most. But I know there's a lot of people out there that won't even give this album a chance just because of who he is and some of the antics he's had over his career. Lost Americana marks a shift, both sonically and emotionally, in his musical journey. The album is a hard-on-sleeve exploration of not only fame, but also identity. It is recorded, I think, mainly in MGK's house, but he utilized a wide range of different collaborators from multiple different genres. And I think he utilized this album as kind of a way to pay homage to all the greats that have ever inspired him across his career. Something I was not expecting with this album was for the official trailer to be narrated by the one and only Bob Dylan, who apparently is a fan of MGK's music. I'm not exactly sure the backstory of how those two got connected, but that was probably the biggest surprise for me in the lead up to this album. So instead of having Travis Barker back to produce the third straight album in a row with him, he decided to go a little bit of a different route. Yes, Travis does play drums on a couple of tracks on the album, but mainly this is all Machine Gun Kelly and some of his longtime collaborators. And it sounds like the intent of this new album was not to really latch on to that more nostalgic sound, but like I said earlier, kind of pay homage to all these other musicians from the 60s all the way to today. I think he's trying to branch out in different directions on this new album and take all these threads from across American music history and kind of weave them into something all new. So something I always talk about in these album review videos is the importance of having a really strong track open your album. Especially in today's age when most people stream music, you only get a couple of tracks to kind of hook somebody and make them want to listen to the album. So it's really important to have that really good first impression. And, it also kind of sets the tone for the album. And sometimes it's okay not to have the strongest track open the album because, like I said, if you're setting the tone with the opening track, you can kind of build off of that. But I think it's got to be one or the other. It either has to be one of the best tracks or it's got to be that tone-setting song. The song Outlaw Overture kicks the album off, and while it does have some of that Tickets to My Downfall kind of feel to it, it's also blended with more of these electronic elements. It starts off the song with this Baba O'Reilly meets Daft Punk synths that kind of quickly break into kind of more of a traditional rock song from Machine Gun Kelly. And if you're a fan of his last couple of albums, that sound will be very familiar to you. But what I found interesting about the song is the last part of it, the last third of the song, breaks into this more slower pace, almost like modern pop meets country kind of sound. I think it kind of serves as almost like an introduction into this new era of his career. I think it sets the tone for this more personal journey you're going to go on across this album with Machine Gun Kelly. And overall, the way I kind of look at this song, it's like a 5-minute long look at basically what his career has been up to this point. It's a shedding of his old self and this introduction of the new. And then the second song on the album is the first single off of it, which was Cliche. And the song served as almost like an announcement to the world of what he was intending to do on this album. It's much more pop. I think it's a lot lighter than most of the stuff he's done over the last several albums. And I think personally it's probably one of the best songs he's done in years. But it might be the most poppiest track he's ever done. It's definitely one of the catchier ones on the album, though. And even though the track is definitely more of a shift towards pop music or pop-centric music, you can still hear some of those undertones on the song that you heard off of both Tickets to My Downfall and Mainstream Sellout. And it's also more of kind of a playful tone that you really haven't heard from Machine Gun Kelly, I think really at all through his career. And then the song Don't Wait, Run Fast is kind of this return to a little more of a Mainstream Sellout kind of sound from him. It's a little bit harder, got a little more of a harder edge, a little more hard-driven kind of a song, which is even a little harder than anything he's done off his last couple of albums, and I think it works for the song. I think the chorus on this song is probably the best part, and it's why I like the song as much as I do. Some of the phrasing he uses on the verses, I don't know, it doesn't quite work the way I want it to. And it's probably one of the more surprising songs on the album, because if you listen to the album as a whole, all 13 tracks, I think it's the one song that kind of stands out a little different than some of the other ones. And maybe because it has a little bit heavier guitar on it, and that's not something he generally has used on his last couple of albums. It doesn't use a lot on this one either. Then that takes us to the song Goddamn, which is more of a mid-tempo kind of a song, a style of song that really kind of dominates on this album. I think it's another one of the stronger tracks on this album. It takes really kind of this open and honest look at what he's done in his life, where he's kind of gone, and some of the errors he's made along the way. I'm not really sure why, but this song seems like it's being picked a lot as one of the more disliked songs on this album. I think primarily people are saying it's not as memorable as some of the other tracks, but the first time through the album, I kind of understood where they're coming from, but the more I've listened to this album, this is probably one of the bigger tracks that's grown on me. And I probably put this up there as one of my favorites on the album. So on this new album, Machine Gun Kelly did want to do another one of those straightforward pop-punk style songs. So the second single off of the album, which is Vampire Diaries, is that song. I think it's probably the shortest song on the album, definitely one of the shortest ones on there. It sounds like it could have come straight off of either Tickets to My Downfall or Mainstream Sellout, but it's got a little more of a polished edge to the song. It's a song that I think has a ton of potential to it, but I think it just kind of misses the mark. Of the 3 singles that were released off this album, I think it's probably the weakest of the 3. And then that takes us to the third and final single off the album. It's probably, I think this might be the best song on the album, which is Miss Sunshine. It's kind of a retro-tinged track with this warm and melodic chorus that is a style that I'd like to see Machine Gun Kelly kind of explore a little bit more moving forward on his future albums. And at this point in the album, it kind of serves as almost kind of this change of pace kind of song, opens up the second half of the album. And then the first time through this album, I came across the song Sweet Coraline, and immediately I thought I was listening to a Strokes song. I know he said that it's the intention of this album to pay homage to all these different musicians that have inspired him over the years. The song very much has this like mid-2000s alt-rock, garage rock kind of sound to it. Like I said, it's going to be very reminiscent. If you're a fan of the Strokes, it's going to be very reminiscent to some of the stuff they did in that time period. But I will say, whenever I listen to the song or talk about the song, it's hard for me to say Sweet Coraline instead of Sweet Caroline. Something I'm really glad to see MGK do on this album is not really stick to a genre. We get to the song Indigo, which quickly became one of our favorites on this album, and is a return to that more like Midwest rap style that MGK grew up in. And even though it's a return to this older style, it's deeper, it's got better execution than I think anything he's done earlier in his career. And it's a track that I think really shows the evolution he's done, not only in his career, but in his personal life over the last, 15 years. The first couple of times I listened to this album, I didn't really know what to think of the song Starman. It's this new and interesting take on Semi-Charmed Life by Third Eye Blind. No, it's not a cover, but it does utilize the chorus of that song. Even though the chorus is more slower, a little bit more laid back, it takes the chorus of that song and builds it into an all-new piece. It's another one of those songs that the more I've listened to this album, the more it's grown on me. I think it's a great homage to not only Third Eye Blind, but that kind of era of 90s rock music. And then the entire vibe on this album changes up for the last few songs on it. The song Tell Me What's Up is kind of this like opening track to the last act of the album. It is kind of a return to a little bit more of that rap rock that he did on Hotel Diablo that helped spur this whole new chapter of his career and go on and inspire both Tickets to My Downfall and Mainstream Sellout. And I think it's really this song in particular that kicks off this more laid back finish to the album. And then that takes us to what I think is the first true ballad on this album, Can't Stay Here. It's a haunting exploration of loss and loneliness. I think it's probably the deepest and maybe the most personal song on this entire album. And it seems to be widely hailed as not only one of the best songs on this album, but maybe one of the best written songs of Machine Gun Kelly's entire career. The song sounds like this journey through some of his deepest thoughts and fears. That's another one of those examples of a song where I just don't think that really any point in his career prior to this album he could have written a song like this. And once again, it shows the growth not only in his career, but also in his personal life. The song Treading Water has one of the few features on this album. It features Mod Sun on acoustic guitar, which Machine Gun Kelly and Mod Sun had been friends for a very long time, so it's not all that surprising to see him make an appearance on this album. The song is a raw and candid look at not only his stay in rehab last year, but also his separation from Megan Fox. And it sounds like an honest acceptance of the role he played in hurting some of the closest people around him. I think this song in particular is probably the emotional heart of this album. And the events he sings about in this song not only played a gigantic role in the creation of this album, but I think also in a lot of the struggles he's gone through in his personal life over the last several years. So the album wraps up with the song Orpheus. Like I said earlier, I like to have a really strong track open an album. I don't always have to have one of the strongest tracks wrap up an album. A lot of times I like something a little more energetic, a little more upbeat, a little more hopeful to finish off the album. It's not really Machine Gun Kelly's thing, though. But Orpheus is this beautifully co-written song with Megan Fox. It features the incredible John Batiste on piano. And this ended up being a beautifully written message to Megan Fox. I think it's probably the best way possible that Machine Gun Kelly could have wrapped up this album. Overall, this album is kind of like an album lost in two worlds. He's got one foot in this older career from Machine Gun Kelly, with rap and rock on here, while the other foot is in this brighter, kind of newer age of his career. It's a lot more mature, it's a lot more pop-centric than anything he's done before. I don't think his album will be as commercially successful as his last two albums, but I think overall, this might be his best album. And stylistically, it's great to see Machine Gun Kelly, just kind of throwing everything to the wind and just doing what he wants to do on an album. Regardless of style, regardless of genre, I think this new, open, kind of like genre-fluid sound and style from Machine Gun Kelly actually works better for him. Sometimes that pop punk style that he had on his last couple of albums came off, a little forced, a little bit relying too much on nostalgia. I think the style he utilizes on Lost Americana, works a whole lot better for him and his talents, and just feels a lot more natural for him. I think the emotional weight on those last, 4 or 5 songs on the album really shows a drastic shift for Machine Gun Kelly. It shows that he's in a very different place now than what he was, even 2 or 3 years ago. And I hope he really continues to explore those themes on his upcoming albums. There's one thing for sure, he poured his heart and soul into this album. But like I said earlier, unfortunately there are people out there because it's Machine Gun Kelly, because of the stuff he's done over his career, or some of the stuff he's said, some of the outlandish things he's done. There's people out there that just won't listen to it. Even though he's on the record as saying that a lot of those interviews he did earlier in his career, he can't even watch anymore because of how ridiculous he was at times. As far as complaints go on the album, I don't really have a whole lot. I mean, at times I think the auto-tune is a little heavy-handed. It could have used a little less of it at times on here. I don't think it really negatively impacts the album, though. There are some other times where they use some of those like robotic sounding claps, which if you're going to do that, just record yourself, clapping in the recording studio and use those. It's going to have a much more of a natural sound to it. But overall, it's a stronger album than I thought it was. And I actually had some pretty decent expectations for this album, and it ended up far exceeding any of the expectations I had. But with that being said, there were some songs that kind of grew on me a little bit. I think the first time I listened to this album, I was probably in the maybe 6.5 to 7 range, but after listening to this album 4 or 5 times over the last day or so, I think the album's a solid 8.5 for me, which I think is a huge jump from what it was on the first listen. So I did decide to grab 2 copies of this on vinyl. I got one is the exclusive off his website, and then I've also got the standard version of it. This is the one off his website, a little bit different artwork on the cover of it, if I get the light off of it there. And then I think the back cover of it is a little bit different. And then I think as far as the picture on the inside of the gatefold, though, I think this is the same picture. Just have a picture of Machine Gun Kelly on there. And then it does have a printed insert with just the lyrics of the song on there. And the exclusive on his website was this pinwheel color. I did already clean it up and give this one a spin a couple of times. I will say that this one actually was pretty clean, coming from a lot of times you order albums from the label and they come pretty dirty. This one I didn't have to do a whole lot of cleaning to. I just ran it through my just in my groove washer on there. I didn't have to run it through my ultrasonic cleaner, but I love the way the pinwheel turned out. And then the standard version of the album, I think it's the picture that's on all like streaming platforms also. Then, like I said, the back cover is a little bit different. Doesn't have a picture of Machine Gun Kelly on there. And then the picture, I guess the picture on the inside is a little bit different. I mean, same general idea, but just a little different. And then it does have the same printed inner sleeve. And the label is the same, but this one's just on a standard, just solid red vinyl. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of this new Machine Gun Kelly album. Have you listened to it yet? Have you bought a copy of it? What do you think of it? What would you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10? Like I said earlier, easily one of the more polarizing musicians out there today. So I'd love to know what you guys think of this album. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.